I do want to talk about two spiritual phenomenas. Is that a word? Two things that are happening to me spiritually at the moment that I want to share with you. The first is life cycles. So I do believe in something, and I've been reading a lot about this. It's called life cycles and like life lessons that you have to continue to learn. And I believe everybody has their own version of this, where they keep encountering the same problem manifesting in different people. So for example, and I believe I've talked about this on the episode, if you're somebody who, this is just, and by the way, this is just totally a hypothetical situation. I'm not pointing to any specific friend or myself. It's just an example. But for example, if you're somebody who maybe you had very bossy, domineering parents growing up, and your coping mechanism was to withdraw and to not confront or deal with it and to just kind of do what they say as a method to escape or avoid the situation, well, guess what? Now you're attracting partners who are just like your parents. All of a sudden your boss is just like your parents. All of a sudden you're attracting friends, and it's just this repetitive life cycle that keeps coming up, and it's continuing to come up in your life to force you to dive in and to deal with the issue. And you're going to keep encountering this problem until you face that issue. So that's what I mean by negative life cycle. That's just one example, but I wanted to share my negative life cycle that I'm dealing with right now with you guys to just be vulnerable and open up about it. So for me, I've always had this feeling of, I've always struggled with financial issues and this feeling that no one's going to save me, that I'm 100% on my own and I have to figure out all my financial issues by myself. And because of that, I'm very unsafe. And it came from this feeling and this cycle came from a very valid place, because when I was younger, and by the way, I love my parents. There's no disrespect to any of them, my mother or my father. I love them both very dearly. But when I was younger, I was very isolated a lot as a result of stuff that my parents were going through. My mother was completely not in the picture at a certain point. She came back in the picture later, but at a certain point, my mother was not in my life at all. And my father, as a single father, was trying to just kind of figure his own stuff out and make ends meet. So he was often out of the house, and I was often by myself trying to figure out life during a very crucial age where it was important for me to have support from other people. But I was very alone and isolated. I mean, I believe 9 years old when all this started going on, and I was like just going through puberty. It was just like a very developmental period of my life that I was alone for a lot of the time. And the more I developed, this person sort of became a part of my personality, where I had this feeling and this belief that I'm alone and nobody could help me and I'll never get help. I'm always going to be by myself. It was just sort of this personality that had developed as a result of my childhood, and it continued for the rest of my life. And I always had this fear about making ends meet financially. And because of that, I think because I did have that fear, I think I would almost continue to manifest more and more situations where I would be like that. And if I were to explain every situation in my entire life, it would be way too much. So I'm going to just kind of talk about where I'm at exactly right now. So a couple years ago, I want to say in 2022, I actually got myself out of a bad financial situation, and I was stable. I was in a great apartment in Central Jersey. I had my own apartment. I had my own space. I was in a creative flow. I was doing great. And then what happened was I fell in love with somebody who was a good guy, but ultimately wasn't the right guy for me. And I knew that at the time. But for some reason, there was something in me that was drawn. Now I'm going to use the word desperately for myself, but there was something in me that was desperately drawn to the idea that he could take care of me and that I wouldn't have to suffer alone financially anymore if I were with him, and that I would be safe with him. I don't want to start crying, but it's a lot to even like verbalize right now, and I made a bad decision to move in with him on a whim without really even knowing him or knowing how we would interact with each other, just sort of impulsively to kind of try to heal this part of myself where I felt like I was trying to figure things out on my own. And by the way, there's no hatred towards this person. I still love them as a friend. I still care about them deeply, but it was very clear that he was not a good match for me. And I still moved in with him anyways. And what ended up happening was exactly what I was afraid of. I was afraid of being in a situation where I wouldn't have anybody to rely on. I actually almost did it to myself. Like I almost put myself in that situation by making this bad decision to move in with somebody who wasn't right for me. And I intuitively knew that before we even dated, but I did it anyways. So what ended up happening was, again, like going back to what I said before, it's almost like your psyche subconsciously keeps continuing to put you in these situations until you figure out why. Like, why do you want to go there? What are you trying to learn and figure out? So where I'm at now with this situation is when my boyfriend and I broke up, I had no money saved up. I had nowhere to go. And I'm so embarrassed, like how much I'm crying right now, but it feels like very vulnerable to talk about this right now. Just like a gift from God. One of my friends was like, I have a place for you. And you don't need security deposit and the rent is in your budget. And it was like something that I don't even know how that lined up for me. It was like something was protecting me and trying to save me. But the kicker is it was only a temporary situation. So while it was a huge blessing and it really saved my ass when I didn't have any plan, for some reason, something bigger than me, which I believe is God, didn't want me to be homeless, but wanted me to learn some sort of lesson, because now I'm going through the same exact thing again, because this situation saved me and it gave me a place to live while I figured out how to make enough money to find my own place. But now I'm sort of feeling the same emotional stress as I did initially, because I got myself in a better financial place and I saved up the money to move out on my own, which I have to, by the way, because this is only a temporary living situation. I knew that moving in here. So this isn't really something I did to myself, so to speak. I needed somewhere to go and I had to figure out what to do. But now I'm it feels like I'm back at square one in a strange way, because all the work that I put into saving up the money to find my own place, well, now I had to spend that money on the security deposit in my own place. And now I'm in this very vulnerable place of feeling like, oh my God, I'm back to square one. I have no money in my bank anymore. I have enough money to, I paid the security and I have enough income to pay the rent, but there's just no foundation of emergency funds anymore. And it's putting me in this very scary, emotionally vulnerable place where it puts me at risk of repeating the same mistakes that I did in the past, where because I'm feeling this way, there is a part of me that's like, I need to fall in love to not have to feel this way anymore. And that's not the solution, and that's not what I'm going to do, but I'm just kind of opening up to the cycle that I'm in. And for some reason, I feel that I'm being put in this cycle for a reason, to learn something. And I don't know if I figured out what I'm supposed to learn out of this. I don't know yet. It's something I'm still figuring out. But the only thing that's coming up right now, and I think this is actually true for everybody, the only thing that I can possibly think of at the moment is that nobody's going to save you except for you. I think that's what I'm meant to learn. And while there are people in the world who are financially supported by their family and don't have to have this type of stress that I do, that doesn't mean that this principle won't help them as well. There's other people in the world that need to be saved, so to speak, in a different kind of way. And the truth is that nobody is going to save you except for you and your relationship to your higher power, to your God, whatever you want to call it. So that's not to say that when I say you, I'm talking about my experience, but I think that this information is valuable to so many different people. I think what that means is, you don't have to believe in God to understand what I'm trying to say. But what I think that means is that you need to have some type of faith and some type of connection to a faith that you will be okay and you will be protected and you could achieve the things that you want to achieve. But there is no person that's going to pick it up and do it for you. There is no, you have to do it yourself. You have to pave your own way in this. And for me, all I can do is just continue to have faith in my path, to continue to do what feels right to me, and to build a connection with a God of some sort or a higher power of some sort, so I do feel protected in the process and I don't feel alone in this process. So I guess where I'm at now with this whole thing is, yes, I'm reliving the same stress and trauma of feeling terrified to make it on my own, but I think I'm gonna make it on my own. And I think I will find love and support, from a romantic partner one day, but it's not gonna happen until I figure this out on my own. No one's going to do it for me. And I'm not even going to be able to have a healthy love until I figure out how to do this on my own. And another thing to say too is I'm also learning that type of love and support that I'm looking for doesn't also need to come from a partner. Like I said, it could come from a faith in a higher power. It could also come from friends and family. It could come from my neighbors. So that's another thing too. There's like this unrealistic expectation that this one man is going to get me a fancy diamond ring, and that because of that, I'm going to be safe and protected and I'll never have to worry about anything again. And that's just not the case. That could be a possibility, that I could have my financial needs met, but that's not, for some reason, for me in my life path, that is not the solution right now. And I'm not sure why, but that's where I'm at with it. I hope that made sense. I'm sorry if that, again, like the fear of judgment, I hope I didn't sound like a crazy person, but I just wanted to open up and talk about that negative life cycle that I'm currently going through and trying to get to the other end of. And I want to encourage everybody to take a look at themselves and their own life and try to identify any repetitive negative patterns that they see in their own life. Do you have a negative pattern with money that you keep repeating? Do you have a negative pattern that you're unhappy in your relationships? Do you have a negative pattern that you're unhappy in your job? Is there anything in your life that you keep coming back to and seeing the same result over and over, manifesting in different forms? And if so, I encourage the listeners to dive deep into it and to understand what it is that they're meant to resolve or learn in that process. None of this is easy, but I think it's necessary. And not only is it necessary, I think it's the point. I think it's like the whole purpose of life, and the most valuable thing you could do with your life is to take an honest look at yourself and try to follow your path. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about in regards to spirituality is